Hi, Pat. Pat, can you hear me? This is Chris.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Are we just waiting for a quorum?
I am trying to log in from my laptop here, so I can see people on the screen, but I can't see how many members are present. I'm happy to do a roll call.
Guess that would be, maybe we should try that and see how close we
Okay.
are. So let's go ahead and
Great.
start with that.
Okay. Charlene Pinella, City of Avondale.
Here.
Ryan Peters, City of Chandler.
Here.
Autumn Groom, City of El Mirage. Dave Trimble, Town of Fountain Hills.
Here.
Mary Goodman, Town of Gilbert. Kevin Phelps, City of Glendale.
Present.
Julie Cairns, City of Goodyear.
Here.
Jacqueline Edwards, Maricopa County. Chris Brady, City of Mesa.
County, I'm standing in for her.
I'm sorry, what is your name?
This is Cameron Doling from Maricopa County. I am standing in for Jacqueline for this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Cameron.
Yeah, Chris Brady is here from Mesa.
Okay, Eric Strunk, City of Peoria.
Here.
Ed Zerker, City of Phoenix.
Mario Paniagua is here from City of Phoenix.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Bruce Gardner, Town of Queen Creek.
Here.
Mark Milanchenko, City of Scottsdale.
Here.
Mike Gent, City of Surprise.
Here.
Stephen Methvin, City of Tempe.
Here.
And Shatwan Reed, ADOT. Okay, Chair, we have a quorum. We can begin.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I apologize. Mary Goodman Gilbert, I missed my name on the roll call.
Oh, thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll convene the meeting of the August meeting. If committee members would like to ask a question or make a comment during the meeting, please type your comment in the box and it will be read aloud and answered. And all meeting attendees, please mute your computer, microphone, or phone. For today's meeting, public comment is being taken in written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. So the next item is the Chief Executive Officer's report. So Mr. Hilliard, we're going to ask you to provide that report.
Thank you, sir. Happy to pinch hit. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Today I'd like to highlight 4 issues for you briefly. The first was Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg's visit to Phoenix on July 15th. He visited our city to discuss the importance of infrastructure investment and to meet with the local leaders who are paving the way, which included Representatives Ruben Gallego and Greg Stanton, Mayors Kate Gallego, John Gills, and Corey Woods, our board chair and Mesa Council member, Mr. Heredia, Glendale Council member Jamie Adama, as well as regional union, other leaders and leaders of our union. They took part in a transit project briefing, toured the downtown hub construction, and met with local media. The secretary commended essential workers for maintaining service throughout the pandemic and praised how our system expansion was creating economic prosperity across the region. Next, save the date. Our Clean Air Campaign luncheon will be Friday, October 29th, 11 a.m. at the Heard Museum. We're limiting capacity to increase our ability to social distance, and the nominations for that exciting event are currently in progress. Also, on July 6th, Valley Metro launched a new mobile app. In addition to the features of the current app, which include route planning, step-by-step navigation, and trip travel time estimation, this new app provides real-time bus and rail tracking and the ability to get alerts and updates on changes in service. This is one step in our larger fare collection replacement project. It's available at both the Apple and Android app stores, and we've had over 5,800 downloads in the first 30 days that it was available. So this is an exciting step forward. In the future, we'll see mobile ticketing available via these apps and the ability for riders to subscribe to custom alerts for routes that they frequent. Finally, Valley Metro's worked with students and teachers from 3 South Phoenix schools to create art to enhance the South Central Downtown Hub project. Kiewit installed this banner art at 3 locations. They include Central and Elwood with a banner by the Academia del Pueblo, Central and Papago, the banner by the Lowell Academy, and Broadway just west of Central Avenue with a banner by the NFL YET Espiritu College Prep. And that, Mr. Chairman, is the CEO's update. Oh,
All right,
I'm sorry.
thank you very much. Oh, one more, go ahead.
Pardon me, I was just saying, lastly, I guess we have the upcoming calendar of meetings.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you. That's the executive officer's report. Next is item 3, the minutes. The minutes from the June 2nd, 2021 joint TMC-RMC meeting are presented for approval. Do we have a motion and a second to approve the June 2nd, 2021 joint TMC-RMC meeting minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval. Dave Trimble and Tom Hills.
Thank you, Dave. Do we have a second?
Second,
Stephen
Julie
Metz,
Goodyear.
City of Tempe.
I think Julie beat you to it, Steve. So we're for the second. So we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone opposed to this item for approval? All right, very good. We'll consider the minutes approved. The next item is item number 4 is the consent agenda. Consent agenda is presented for action. Are there any questions from members of the committee or any items that need to be pulled for a separate discussion? If not, we'll request a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda and for the items to the board of directors for approval. So there are 3 items on the consent agenda. Do we have a motion for approval?
This is Mario from Phoenix. I move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mario. Steve, you want to do a second? Julie?
Sorry about that, Chris. Yeah, it's Stephen from Tempe. Happy to do a second.
Thank you, Stephen. I knew I could count on you for that. So we have a motion and a second in favor of approval of the consent. Is there anyone who opposes? If not, we'll consider the items approved and forward those onto the board. Thank you. All right, the next item is item 5, which is the draft Valley Metro FY 2022 strategic plan. And I guess Jim Hilliard, we're going to have you give us a presentation on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so as you may know, Valley Metro is due for an update to its strategic plan. We began this process in 2019, but shifted our focus to the pandemic in 2020. Therefore, the purpose of this presentation is to share with you the draft plan and to gather your feedback and ultimately the board's feedback on the draft and, should the board choose, to adopt the plan for FY 2020. For the purposes of today's presentation, I'll be working off of the table that's in your packet. It's a 2-sided table with a purple banner at the top. And so if you turn to that table, there are 3 improvements over Valley Metro's previous strategic plan that I think we were focused on in this update. The first was to draft goals that we felt better captured our priorities and the value of connecting communities and enhancing lives. So the 2016 to 2020 plan had 4 goals: increase customer focus, advance performance-based operations, grow transit ridership, and advance the value of transit. We felt those were all great concepts, but we didn't think they captured the breadth of the work that Valley Metro does. Nor did we think they communicated as clearly to our community the value of transit. Therefore, we proposed the 5 goals that you see in the top row of the table in your packet. 3 of these are customer focused. The first, excellent rider experience. The second is enhanced lives through regional mobility in our current system. And then the third, enhanced lives through regional mobility in the future system. We felt that inclusion of this future system goal was important to reflect the fact that so much of the work that we see, for example, up and down Central Avenue today is the product of almost a decade of planning and work. And so because transit has to be so forward-looking, we wanted to make sure we had a goal that sort of highlighted that looking forward to the system of tomorrow. Next, we wanted to include a goal that focused on our regional partners, and you see that in the third goal, maximize efficiency and member city engagement. Those were the 2 major themes that we heard in a series of meetings that Alexis and I held with many of you, your teams, or your board member. And then lastly, we felt it important to include a goal that focused on Valley Metro's growth as an organization, because building those capabilities would naturally be critical to achieving the other 4 goals noted. So the second improvement that we sought in this plan was to really expand our ability to measure our progress toward those goals. The original 2016 to 2020 plan included only 5 performance measures. They were boardings per revenue mile, boardings per revenue hour, boardings per trip, fare box recovery, and on-time performance. Once again, we think those are excellent metrics, and most of them have been included in our recommendation, but we certainly didn't feel they covered the breadth of our objectives as an organization. And so then you see in the bottom section of that table, the performance measures for the 2020 year that we'd suggest including. These measures fall into 2 categories. You'll see under each goal, there's a column labeled Valley Metro Performance. And so those are performance measures that we would intend to set targets for and to work to improve as an organization. Under the current system and future system goals, you'll see a second column labeled Regional Indicators. So as we worked on capturing the data that we thought was important to illustrate progress toward these 5 goals, we noticed that there were a number of data points that we thought were critical for understanding the transportation in the region, but where Valley Metro didn't have full control over those outcomes. And so a perfect example, for example, under the current system goal would be the last 3 measures that we propose: employment, population, and education within a half-mile of transit. So as you all know, route planning is a very shared process in our region, with the vast majority of routes being funded by cities. Being able to gauge the spread of our service is critical, important context for us as managers and for the board, but not something that we think we could set as an outright performance measure, given the competing budget priorities that all of us face in deciding and making route planning decisions. And so you see regional indicators listed under both the current system and the future system for those things that we think are critical for us all to have as context, but not necessarily measures of Valley Metro's performance as an agency. Lastly, please turn to the second page of the handout, or the second section of the table if you're looking at it online. We wanted to make sure that we were able to go from our top level goals as an organization to the measures that we were hoping to impact, and then finally to the work plan for each year, and to engage the board in a discussion of the priorities of that work plan for the agency in the upcoming year. And so what you see on this table then is the incorporation of the work plan presented by the CEO to the board in June and approved by the board in June for the upcoming year, categorized per the goals that they're intended to impact. And so our proposal would be that each year, as part of the CEO's planning process with the board, that there's a dialogue about those priorities, and that they're incorporated and displayed to show the areas of focus that we've set for the upcoming year. So with that sort of orientation to the document, I'd appreciate any questions or feedback.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Jim?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Kevin from Glendale.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Thanks for the presentation. So is this the actual plan, or is there then an additional body of work that the team's going to do to kind of further develop the plan? Or is this, when you say this is our strategic plan, is this kind of represent that?
We had really hoped to keep this document as concise as possible. We felt it needed to do three things. What are you focused on? How will you know that you're progressing? And then what are you going to do to move the needles? And we thought this accomplished that. Obviously, behind the scenes, for each of the items on the work plan that you see in the second table, there'll be a separate project plan of how we're moving those things forward. We just didn't think that level of detail was useful for this purpose.
Yeah, I think it's that last goal about, it's one thing to know kind of where you want to go and how you want to measure whether you've arrived or not. In my mind, the strategic plan is really all about what do you have in place to get you to where you want to go, so that when you measure it, that you know that you've got success. And so I just didn't see a lot of kind of the meat of what I would usually say needs to be part of the strategic plan, which really then talks about what are the things we're going to do as an organization to make sure we can achieve where we want to go. So, I mean, there's not a lot of talk about, for example, things like organizational capacity. There's not things talking about systems and processes. There's not elements here that talk about the financial component of managing, of how we do all that. No. So I was hoping I'd hear there'd be a little bit more in terms of the actual strategies that the organization is going to implement to get you where you go. I think you've set really good measures and you've got a good way to get there. I'm just not sure this would tell me as a board member what's your strategy of how you're going to get to success. Thank you.
Thanks for that feedback.
All right, Mario, did you have something?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just a couple questions. Just wanted to echo Mr. Phelps's comments that I think you've got a great start, and you guys are you've got some good items in here to be striving for. A couple of questions. One of them on the goals and measures for under organizational excellence. On percentage of promotions filled internally, I was just hoping to get a better idea of what you were shooting for with that one. Is there a specific percentage that you're looking to achieve, or because I just want to make sure that doesn't create incentives that kind of work against other goals?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. So I think what we're trying to get at with that measure is the efficacy of our internal succession planning work and development of staff. Right? We're providing training for folks because we want them to be able to grow as professionals with us. And one way you know that's working is you're seeing people be prepared for the next steps in their career and able to promote. At this juncture, we have not been capturing that data historically, so our first step would be just a baseline to see where we're at. And then we'd want to think about, what is that telling us about the effectiveness of our employee development, of our succession planning processes. So I think we're too early on to say, whether there would be a hard goal for that or what it would be. But I think that the issue that you're hinting at is, you wouldn't want an effort to achieve some number on that measure to then result in the promotion of folks that maybe weren't the best candidate for a particular role. And we couldn't agree more with that. The overall goal of this is organizational excellence. And so that'll happen by having the right person in each role, whether they happen to be an internal or an external candidate. We just want to know that we're doing everything we can internally to invest in our folks and thereby build a stronger agency over time.
Thank you, Jim. I guess moving off to the work plan itself, and again, under organizational excellence, there's an item that just refers to the CFO, CEO reporting structure. I know that there's been quite a bit of discussion on that over the years, and just wanted to see why that's on there, what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. As I said, the items that you see here were items that Scott presented to the board at its June meeting for his work plan for the upcoming year. And I think that was at a time when we were just beginning on the the CFO recruiting process. And so I think it was one of the things that he was hoping early in the year to clarify was how we would proceed in the hiring of the CFO and his role as CEO in doing that. So that may be one that I think has already been addressed by the conversations that happened at that time. I don't know if Alexis has anything she'd like to add to that.
This is Alexis, Mr. Chairman, board members. I don't believe that there's much more to add on that front. It was a conversation that the CEO had with the board. I think it may continue to be an ongoing conversation in terms of organizational structure moving forward, but I have not been privy to any additional conversations since that June meeting.
Okay, anything else, Mario?
No, I think that's it for now.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hey, Chris, it's Eric from Peoria. How you doing? Good?
Good, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. And thank you for the presentation, Jim. When I kind of looked at this in the packet, I kind of think it was missing a few pieces. And in my mind, it's a little bit more of the weedish stuff, if you will. Some of the categories, some of the items on there are not defined, percentages and whatnot. I know this is draft. I was hoping maybe there might be a little more narrative to this. This would be a high-level summary. And, there's a few things on here that I think we've asked you questions on. But if there's any chance of developing that a little bit more robustly, I think that might be helpful. And I wasn't privy to the conversation Scott had with the board and what they indicated. Even if they get this in this format, they're going to have a few questions and they're going to seek a little more clarity. And I think it would be very helpful moving forward, if that's at all possible, to maybe be a little more robust in the narrative on some of this, lay it out a little bit more. One of the big questions I had in my mind was how did we do from 2016 to 2020? And you alluded to you like those objectives, but what's the report card on that? I think we've seen little bits here and there, but piecing it all together into one would be very, very helpful, I think, as we move forward. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thanks very much.
Anyone else? So, Jim, I'm going to go with kind of follow up with Mario and Eric. I would say that I appreciate the effort on the strategic plan, but I think if you were to go look at strategic plans that municipalities put together or large organizations, this is probably not what I would consider a strategic plan. A strategic plan would have a little more narrative, a little more broader kind of policy direction. It feels like it's kind of trying to be a lot of different things. And maybe in the future, I think it would be good for the staff and helping the board, and we recognize this is a challenge sometimes with boards, but establishing kind of the higher level strategic vision and broader goals of objectives, and then separating that from the action plan and the specific performance measures. There seems to be in here a combination of these kind of scattered in the different columns. So sometimes it feels like we're trying to talk about something that's a broader strategic plan. And then sometimes it feels like we're trying to measure a specific performance. And I think normally there would be a very distinction of that in kind of a sequence of how it would be presented in a document. Maybe going to Kevin's point, it would be a little more of a narrative and a policy conversation on the strategic vision and statements. And then underneath of those, you would have some objectives, and then you'd kind of have a work action plan that would be driven. And you would have, to Eric's point, you would have, here's what are these falling under the strategic plan in and vision have specific performance measures, and here's how our performance has been in the past, and here's how the goal was and how close we came to that goal. I think if this needs to keep moving forward, and maybe this is the way, this is more of a conversational item with the board, that's fine. But I think it would be good for Valley Metro, at least from my perspective, to find a way to kind of maybe mirror some other strategic plans with objectives and performance measures that are more typical than probably what you're hearing from the cities is what we experience. And I don't know if anybody wants to weigh in on that. That's my just thought looking at this for an organization as sophisticated and complex as this. Front and back pages, probably you're not going to meet the standard of a strategic plan. But it's maybe a start, but maybe it's something we can work on in the future. I don't know, any thoughts from anybody else on that? I don't know if I'm off base on that.
Mr. Chair, this is Mary from Gilbert, and I would completely agree with what you just shared in the sentiments. I think that, and also from Mario and Eric, I think expanding on this a bit, I understand the desire to keep it high level, but I think it may have gone maybe too far in that direction. So adding some of that narrative and some structure would be helpful.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. There's
Hey,
your
Chris,
input.
this is Julian
Oh.
Goodyear. Can I just add one additional comment is the reporting aspect of it. I think that would be good to nail down as well as to, would they be quarterly updates or, every 6 months or once a year? Because I think this is just a 1-year plan, but I like that thought of having some type of report that summarizes it at the end.
Very good. And I would encourage, especially, Gilbert and others, I know that some of you do strategic planning and you have documents that go to your council. It may be good to share those with Jim, just so he kind of gets a sense of what we're talking about. I think that always helps. So, all right. Okay. Any other comments on, what is this, item 5? I guess we can go ahead and forward it to the board, but I think with the caveat that we think there's more work to be done in the formatting and the detail in the future. Is that fair? I'm sure this board likes to have a conversation about the direction of where the staff is going, but maybe the formatting and the approach can be continue to be modified. So with that, do we have a motion to forward this to the board of directors?
So moved, Julian Goodyear.
Thank you, Julie. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Eric from Peoria.
Thank you, Eric. So we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone opposed to forwarding this on to the board of directors? If not, we will consider this approved and we'll move that forward. Thank you very much for the input. The next item is item 6. And that is on the quarterly reports. And this is presented for information. Are there any questions on the quarterly report? Kind of goes into some of that detail maybe Julie was talking about. And I think what would be great is having these quarter reports link back to that strategic plan, right? So how do you, when you read the strategic plan, you're saying, oh, okay, here's the narrative of the policy direction, and underneath that strategic plan, I can go to a quarter report and know that there's a specific performance measure or metrics that will be presented each quarter. Any other comments or questions on item 6?
Yeah, Chris from Peoria, just a real quick question. I'm kind of curious on all accounts on the on-time performance. It dips obviously, and there's probably a good reason for that. But I was wondering if Jim or whoever could just take a few minutes and do you see a pathway to increasing on-time and performance anytime soon? But I did note that it seems to be a little off in all categories.
Thank you. Absolutely. Mr. Abraham, would you mind speaking to that?
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Chair, members of the TMC. Yes, our actual on-time performance is less than our targets. And it's mainly due to the fact that we have a new system that monitors the on-time performance. As you may have heard us talking about over the last couple of years, we put this clever device system in. And quite frankly, the big difference is our old on-time performance and our old targets were set on an arrival-based system that we had previous. The clever device system is now a departure-based system. So your on-time performance will somewhat drop due to that. And secondly, we've been doing a lot of research in our on-time performance category, and we are probably higher than industry standards. That our numbers of 92% were, rather ambitious over the years, and to be able to provide 85, 86% or higher on-time performance is actually rather good in the industry. And again, I said it changed a lot due to arrival or departure. I'm sure you understand what that means. The bus pulls at a time point on time, but at the time it picks up people, picks up a wheelchair, whatever, they depart late. So now it's considered a late trip as opposed to an on-time trip. So that's fundamentally the reason for the slight slippage that you've been seeing routinely.
Do you foresee that continuing on, or do you see potential adjustment in the target?
I see an adjustment in the target that we will be coming with you. We just haven't made the move yet because of COVID and because of ridership being down. We want to wait till we get back to somewhat normal. But yes, you will see an adjustment in our target. It'll be somewhere in the mid 80s to high 80%.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the quarter reports, item 6? All right, very good. We'll continue moving forward. We're now on item 7. Again, this item is presented, not much here. Any questions on item 7? All right, I'm going to keep moving. We're on item 8. Are there any agenda items for future meetings, or if anyone would like more information about some item in the future from the board members? If not, we'll be going to item 9. So the next meeting of the joint TMC RMC is scheduled for Wednesday, September 1st at 11 o'clock. And that concludes our joint meeting. Very good, thank you. All right, I know you guys are going to get really tired of me really fast, and I apologize. I had nothing to do with the fact that I have to run all these meetings, so somebody decided pass on their assignment, so I guess I get it all. So anyway, so now we're going to move to we're going to convene the Transit Management Committee meeting for the August meeting. Again, for public comment, for today's meeting, public comment is being taken in a written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. So item number 2, minutes. The minutes from the June 2nd, 2021 TMC meeting are presented for approval. So we have that up for, we need a motion and a second to approve the TMC meeting minutes for June 2nd, 2021. Do I have a motion?
Mario from Phoenix, I move approval.
Thanks, Mario. We have a motion from Mario. I need a second. Whose turn is it?
Mary Goodman from Gilbert, I'll second.
Thank you, Mary. Way to step up. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for the June 2nd, 2021 meeting. Is there anyone opposed to that approval? If not, we'll consider those minutes approved. Very good. All right, now we're going to move to the consent agenda. Item 3. It looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items for approval. Any items that need to be withdrawn or pulled for separate discussion by the board? Okay, at some point in the future, I would like to know about Franklin Covey. That's been around for a long time. It seems like to know about its efficacy in today's world, but we can talk about that later. Consent agenda, so we need a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. We have a motion.
Hi, Chris, it's Stephen from Tempe. I can make the motion or a second.
You're right there. Keep up with the motion, Stephen. You're doing well.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right, so we have a motion from Stephen. We have somebody else who wanted to make a second. Who is that?
Julian Goodyear.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate it. We have a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda. Is there anyone who does not approve of that agenda being approved? Otherwise, we'll consider the item approved by the board. Thank you very much. All right, now we're going to move to item 4, which is the recommended October transit service changes. And again, we're going to ask Jim Hilliard to give us a briefing on item 4. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will hand it off to Joe Gregory. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm here to talk about the October 2021 recommended service changes, which we are currently planning to put into effect in October. Next slide, please. So before we begin, we have some Phoenix changes that you'll notice are not in the actual board memo because we only include items that are operated by Valley Metro or paid for with PTF funds. But I wanted to include these items also just to make sure that everyone is understanding the full context of all the changes in the system. So the first change is in Phoenix on Route 0A, the South Central Shuttle. Remember when the downtown hub constructions began, Phoenix split the Route 0 into 2 separate routes, the Route 0 north of Van Buren and the Route 0A south of Van Buren. So this would change slightly the frequency, but it would maintain 15 minutes frequency north of baseline and then 30 minutes south of baseline. Next one, here's another Phoenix change. And the next 3 are going to be Phoenix changes, and they're all related to a deviation that the Route 7, 8, and 52 currently use to access the Ed Pastor Transit Center. Again, with the construction along Central and on Broadway, that's made these deviations somewhat untenable for operating these routes. So the first one is Route 7. This would remove the Broadway Road deviation, and it would no longer serve the Ed Pastor Transit Center. And then the frequency would also be improved to between 10 and 15 minutes south of Van Buren, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Next one, please. Route 8, again, another removal of a deviation into the Ed Pastor Transit Center. This one would remove that deviation, but would also extend the route on the south end to connect with Central Avenue. So there would still be that connection to the Route 0A at Central. And the next one is Route 52. This is the last of the Phoenix ones. This would also remove that deviation on Broadway into the Ed Pastor Transit Center. Otherwise, this route would not change. So the next are the ones that are actually in your board memo. So we'll first start with a lot of the Tempe changes. The big one would be to reduce the evening service by 2 hours on weekdays and Saturdays. So service would then run between about 5 a.m. and 11 p.m. in Tempe. You can see that it basically affects all of the local routes in Tempe. The Orbit Mercury would have a reduced frequency from 10 minutes to 15 minutes. Partially, this is due to some of the new buses that we've gotten for the Orbits that have a little bit higher capacity. So the Orbit Mercury, you know, the high frequency 10-minute service was really meant to alleviate a lot of the overcrowding due to ASU. And with these larger buses, we feel that we can you know, serve it with a few fewer buses, but they have a little bit more capacity. The next one is a change to the Tempe Orbit Saturn. This is one of the circulators within Tempe and South Tempe, south of US 60. So it would change it to a little bit more kind of an east-west route. Currently, it hits the Tempe Library kind of in the middle of the route. So this would change it a little bit, and it would serve a little bit more of Guadalupe Road. And this will be in combination, as you'll see, with the Route 65, 66, and 62. to serve all of the corridors with a little bit less service. The next one is Route 62. So this would change the routing of the southern end. It would no longer run along Guadalupe Road on the southern end. So this would take the southern portion would take up the portion that's currently served by Route 65, which is going to be eliminated. And again, as we just talked about, Route 65, you see here that it does run along Mill Avenue in the north part. That's a duplicative service on Route 66. So we're going to remove the route of the 65. The Route 62 will take over the southern portion, and then the Route 66 will have some enhanced frequency to take care of those trips on the northern portion on Mill Avenue. Again, here we are with the Route 66. This will enhance the frequency especially on this northern portion of it down to Elliott to again make up for the loss of service on Route 65. And here is just a map that shows how all of the changes will work together. You see there's only a small portion on Guadalupe Road that will lose a little bit of service, but otherwise we're really just removing duplicative service in the kind of Tempe area. Okay, so we have some Mesa changes as well, and these are service enhancements. So on Route 45 on Broadway Road, we're going to expand the Saturday service to 30-minute frequency. And then this is implement Sunday service to match that Saturday service. So previously that route had not had Sunday service in Mesa, so this will be a really good change for our riders. Similarly, on Route 120, we would increase the weekday span from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. and then also increase Saturday service from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and the frequency to 30 minutes. And then the Sunday service would also match the Saturday service, which again is another one of these routes that does not currently have Sunday service. So this will be a great addition to the riders. Route 156, this is just a small change to a turnaround in order to serve the Dignity Health Mercy Gilbert Hospital in Gilbert. This will change it into a little bit different turnaround, a one-way turnaround loop at that area, just to avoid some of the construction that's going on there and make the operations easier for the buses. Route 514, so currently this is the Fountain Hills Scottsdale Express. This will just become the Scottsdale Express. So with this, the portion that connects from Fountain Hills into Scottsdale would be eliminated. And the route would start and end at the Mustang Transit Center in Scottsdale. And then to make up for that service, there's a new service coming in, the Fountain Hills Mesa Connector, which will connect the Fountain Hills Library Park and Ride to the Gilbert Road and McDowell Park and Ride, where, again, riders would be able to connect to additional express service. And between these two services, the Fountain Hills riders will now have a faster way into downtown than the current 514. And last but not least is the Peoria on the Go, the POGO. This is going to now come back with 3 different routes. There's a red, blue, and green route you can see here. And it's now going to be more narrowly focused on a lot of the destinations in Peoria and a lot of the, especially around the P83 area and connecting those neighborhoods throughout Peoria into kind of the central entertainment and business district in Peoria. And this is more focused on some of these events. So it's going to be running Friday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And it'll be serving, the activity centers and points of pride in Peoria. And that's it for me. So thank you. And please let me know if you have any questions.
All right, thank you. Some of you guys have been really busy. So is there any questions on this item? Item number 4.
Yeah, Chris, it's Stephen.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank our partners at Valley Metro and our bordering cities for some of the changes that we had to make in Tempe. I know it wasn't always easy, but we do appreciate the teamwork and the partnership on making those changes. And I think we can address some of this in the future with if we can ever get to a point where we have some predictable growth rates in how we, at least for us, how we have to make those changes, because when we have unexpected costs and we have a fixed revenue source, it typically means that we have to readjust our routes and our frequencies, and we hate doing that as much as anybody else. But I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you to Valley Metro and to you and Mesa and Phoenix for working with us on some of those changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Anyone else? All right, well, Stephen, it sounds like you need to make a motion on this item.
I'm happy to make the motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second, this is Mario.
Thank you, Mario. So we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone who does not approve of item number 4 in the transit changes, service changes? If not, we'll assume everybody's for this item and we'll say it's approved. It's been recommended for approval. So thank you for that. All right, the next item is item 5. This is authorization to issue a competitive solicitation for autonomous vehicles pilot program. So who's, Jim, you're going to have someone make a presentation on this, or are you going to do this one?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we'll have Angie DeVore from our team speak to it. Angie's presentation will have 2 components. One will be presenting the request for approval of a solicitation, but in addition to that, at the RTAG meeting, it was suggested that we provide some context for autonomous vehicle pilots around the country to give you and the board some sense of what's being done elsewhere and why there may be benefit in our continuing to learn in our own region. So with that, Angie, please take it away.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Chair and members of the TMC, thank you for allowing me to present an option to continue the region's commitment to stay current with technology and also to look to future technologies to see how they can either complement or advance the value of transit. I'd like to provide first a little background and context on the recently completed project and how this project would differ from that demonstration pilot and a few of the benefits. In 2018, Valley Metro entered into an agreement with Waymo with a budget of $200,000 to pilot AV use cases. After a review of numerous project ideas and to be as fiscally responsible as possible, we leveraged the Mobility on Demand Sandbox grant, which would fund the AV research. So since we were able to use the majority of the allocated grant funding to develop the data and information collection plan, coordination with Volpe Center, FTA, perform analysis, conduct focus groups, roundtables, and produce a final report, we only needed to use Valley Metro's budget for operations of the pilot, which was less than 10% of the original budget. Also contributing to the lower cost of the project was the type of project. It was an on-demand project with the service provider who was already in operation. So for example, if you were conducting an autonomous vehicle shuttle project, you would typically have to lease a vehicle in order to conduct that pilot. And also contributing to the lower cost was the smaller pool of the ride choice focused test group and the geographic area. So the Sandbox project ended on June 30th, 2021, culminating with a final report. FTA is expected to publish this report any day, but has asked us not to share it until they have the official publication out. As soon as it's published, RTAG, TMC, RMC, and the board will be provided a link to that report. Now, during this pilot, our users took over 1,145 rides, and the primary focus of the project was to understand really the ride choice users' perceptions of safety and the adoption of the technology, along with did they experience increased freedom? Did they take more trips? And the answer to that question is yes. And some of the key takeaways, which are in the board memo, is that the participants felt safe. They found the services more convenient than the typical ride choice options. They made new trips. They embraced AVs as a mobility option. They were interested in riding alone without a safety operator, and they would also like to be among the first to adopt the use of AVs. So we were able to gain valuable insight and data on the perception of autonomous vehicles by the ride choice customers. Whereas this new pilot differs is the focus on the adoption of technology by the general public, and more importantly, connections to transit. And we'd like to explore options with the AV company to primarily pilot use cases around connections to transit or underserved areas. This would allow us to either target a larger audience and identify how it can integrate into an overall larger transit ecosystem. It'll also provide us with context to provide input to both FTA and FHWA on AV policies moving forward based on the data that we collect, which is one of a few benefits. Other benefits include the ability to take advantage of AVs in areas that would operate at a lower cost, such as micromobility, for underserved areas or first mile, last mile solutions. So Valley Metro staff is respectfully seeking authorization to issue a competitive solicitation for an AV pilot that would be open to the general public, provide information on the adoption of technology, and connect customers to transit. The cost and budget for this pilot is requested at a 5-year cost of $250,000. Funds would be accounted for annually in the agency's operating budget. So in conclusion, Valley Metro is committed to the region by staying current with technology and looking to future technologies to see how they can complement or advance the value of transit. And this pilot is one way we can do that. I'd be happy to answer any questions or can continue on to the presentation requested by RTAG.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we need to should we just keep going or any questions? Okay. So we have, so this is for action, correct? Yes.
So Chris, I do have questions, but I'm sorry. Was she saying there's another presentation still to come on this topic?
Thank you, Joe. That's kind of, is there a follow, were you saying there's a presentation and a follow-up from questions you got at RTAG? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there is. Mr. Chairman, RTAG asked.
We'll just roll right into that.
Forgive me, RTAG asked us to provide a little bit of context for AV projects that were going on in other parts of the country.
Oh, okay.
And so Angie has a brief deck to share that information.
Yeah, go ahead, Angie. Go ahead and let's roll into that.
Okay, next slide, please, Pat. So some automation project examples by project types can be divided typically into a few different categories, one being on-demand and shuttle, and the other being driver assistance technologies. For on-demand, that typically means that it can operate in any location within a defined service area, it travels at the posted speed, and that a safety driver does not necessarily need to be present. For a AV shuttle, it typically operates within a mapped point-to-point or closed loop area. It will travel at low speeds, anywhere from like 10 to 23 miles an hour, and a safety driver is usually present. Examples of AV shuttles are like Ollie, Navia, Easy Mile, and those and others. Next slide, please. The other type of projects that are being put into place are around driver assistance, which is like precision docking or lateral lane guidance, automatic acceleration or automatic braking, and pedestrian avoidance safety systems. I've included one other on here simply because it is in the charts for the FTA-funded projects, which is a rural fixed route project that is going on in Iowa. It operates on a defined route, and so it's in the research phase at this point and not in operations. Next slide, please. So of the FTA-funded automation projects by project type, of the 14 projects right now, the most common are the autonomous shuttles and the driver assistance projects. Of the 2 on-demand projects, one was performed by Valley Metro. The other is the city of Arlington, Texas, which is currently in operations, and they are using a company called Drive.ai. Next slide, please. And then projects by funding amount and what they have received as far as federal funding. If we look in the project ranges from 120,000 to 25 million, and Valley Metro's proposed project budget really fits in at the lower end of that threshold for automation projects, but is one of only a few in the on-demand space. Other areas in the country are looking at more of the driver assistance area and also in the AV shuttles. And then slides 8 through 10 are simply for your reference with a brief description of the projects and the references used for the project. Of the 14 projects, 9 of them are in planning, 3 are in operation, and 2 are completed, which includes Valley Metro.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can then summarize. So the item before you would issue an RFP to initiate a second autonomous vehicle pilot project. The objective of that project would be to expand on our initial experience that focused on the ride choice population. It is, as Angie noted, of the on-demand type. So we'd be seeking a provider who could provide service across sort of a general component of our region on routes specified by the rider. And we think this has applicability in two key areas. First, as Angie mentioned, we'd like to see how the use of autonomous vehicles works as a first mile, last mile extender to existing fixed route transit. Secondly, we know that there are parts of our region that have relatively little fixed route transit where microtransit is an important consideration, and we'd like to be able to see how autonomous vehicles could serve as microtransit providers in those areas. So what we would do specifically and with whom would be determined by the bids received to that RFP. And obviously we'd be working closely with your city transit staff in the development of the scope and evaluation of the bids received.
All right, thank you. Any questions now for staff on this item?
Chris, this is Julie again. So when we talk about the location for the second pilot, you talked about a general component of region. Can you specifically state, will the RFP be for a certain area of the region, or how's that going to be defined?
Yes, thanks for that question. I should have made that clear. So one of the challenges with these on-demand providers is they typically have a service area that they're interested in utilizing their vehicles. So as you're aware, Waymo is one on-demand provider. Their service area over the last year and a half, 2 years has been limited to kind of the Southeast Valley. And so our RFP will simply ask, where can you provide service and what types of pilots would you be willing to engage with us on at what cost? So this is not a case, we don't believe this is a case where we can dictate the service area because we're asking, them to use sort of their vehicles that are already in production and testing. So we'll be curious to see what areas are proposed by the AV vehicle providers.
So just a follow-up comment on that, I guess my concern is that leads me to believe it's not going to be the Southwest Valley. And when you talk about the need for microtransit and the transit islands, it seems like it might be helpful if we did include in the RFP specifically where we'd like to see them focus their efforts. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, we could certainly include in the RFP areas that we would prefer to try to encourage a broader geography to be served. We'd love to see that. We think it would be a better pilot.
Yeah, maybe that's the point, right? The idea is to find someone who's willing to give the broadest level of scope of service in the area as possible. I think that makes sense. So, okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chair, this is Mario.
Go ahead, Mario.
I guess I would just, I want to thank Angie for the presentation and the information. Appreciate the need to look at this further. My question is more about the timing based on just where the organization is right now with all of the impacts from COVID and the need to focus on getting more riders back, when we can to the bus and rail system. My question is really just about the timing of this effort. Is now really the right time to be moving forward with this, and just whether this would be a distraction to the greater focus right now. Maybe that's more of a question for Jim.
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. We don't think that it would in any way distract us from our focus on the recovery from the pandemic and our planning for Prop 400 extension going forward. In fact, we really think that this works sort of hand in glove with both of those. We know that autonomous vehicles are in all of our future. And as Angie mentioned, the companies that are developing these systems are typically, and we're talking especially about those on-demand providers like the Waymos and Ubers and Teslas of the world. They're developing their products with the mass market in mind, not with transit in mind. And so, we think it's important to sort of get ahead of this a bit, to understand how they can facilitate greater transit ridership, so that we're able to lead that target and use them where they're going to be effective. We're not concerned that this, for example, would detract from the use of transit more broadly. At $50,000 a year, you're not going to see thousands and thousands and thousands of people being able to access these services without regard to what part of the valley that they're serving. But we do think that that the buzz that working with autonomous vehicle providers has already created and would continue to create, can kind of help people have transit more front of mind to realize that we're looking to move with the times and encourage ridership both now and in the future.
Jim, I appreciate your response. Thanks.
All right, anybody else?
Yeah, Chris, it's Eric. I had a real quick question of Jim or Angie. You indicated that the one that closed out was FTA funded, and if this to move forward, this would be your operating budget, correct? I guess.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The question I have is, that kind of comes out of the PTF, and I know there's been some sensitivity to it. This would it might be at the expense of something else down the line, and I know we've had some conversation on the LCP and everything that's factored into it. It isn't a large amount, but it is an amount over a period of time. Any thoughts on that perspective?
Yes, thank you for that question. You're right. A dollar is a dollar. And so this would be committing $50,000 a year over the 5 years of the pilot to help us sort of better understand how we could use autonomous vehicles
Right.
As part of our larger transit mix. We don't think that's a concern in terms of addressing sort of larger priorities, but a dollar's a dollar.
The other thing to note too, this does not preclude us also from looking for additional grant funding in order to either expand on the project or to fund the project. This is merely to get us moving forward, get a partner in place, determine the parameters around the project, and start moving forward.
And actually, Angie, that's a great point. That's absolutely the case. And obviously, the ultimate contract that would emerge from this RFP would come back to this body and to the board for approval before implementation.
So just follow up to, I think I heard you mention the potential for a partnership or a funding source, or no?
We are always looking for opportunities to leverage, federal funding in these projects. There isn't a grant that we're aware of at the moment, but we continue to scan the horizon. The other thing that we'll be seeking in the RFP is the degree to which the AV provider is willing to sort of partner and help defray costs.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Just some perspective here, maybe it's going a different direction. I think it's a great idea. I think the technology is headed our way. I think this is a good time to kind of experiment with it. I don't know, maybe depending on the kind of responses you get from the industry, kind of going to Julie's perspective, I would be fine with the idea that if we need to motivate, incentivize some of these autonomous vehicles to go in areas that are underserved. I think that's a great idea. I think $50,000 a year for this region is actually kind of very low. I think we could be a lot more committed, but I think we need to put our toe in the water. But I think down the line, I think this is a great opportunity to extend services, to connect people to transit. And I think by the time we go through all of the testing and bringing someone on, hopefully transit is back in play and it becomes popular. I certainly wouldn't have any problem that if you had the opportunity, you saw really good proposals from multiple vendors that would be willing to kind of spread out across the region, I'd be willing to go more than the 250. We could get a variety, because so we get the pilot programs to test the concept, right? And maybe the shuttles look more appealing, or maybe it's single ridership. I don't know, but I think we need to keep our eyes open to the future. Some of these other cities have committed more. They're kind of known as the push the envelope entrepreneur cities, and I don't think we need to fall behind. So I would just be interested. Hopefully, the way the RFP is written, we can really try to attract a lot of companies who may be willing to spread out across the valley. I don't want this to be one just concentrated in one area, but if we have to do something to kind of help motivate them, that I think we need to look at this when this comes back around. But I think this is kind of interesting and something that is worth our time and effort to look into. So thank you very much for that.
Hey, Chris, can I add a thought to that? This is Julie again.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
I'd love to see if there was a way to maybe include in the RFP a way for individual cities to partner. So say, for example, that they don't have any inherent interest in coming out my way, but with a, you know, contribution by my city, you know, that we could actually, you know, play with that. I think that we'd be really open to at least having that conversation as to if there's a local match of some kind to allow us to play. I think it's our answer, honestly.
No, I love that. I think that's great. And maybe we want more than $50,000 worth, or our portion of $50,000. I mean, maybe the idea is to find qualified vendors out there who have the capacity, willing to commit. I feel that's what the RFP kind of lends itself to, and then we can kind of manage it from there. So that's a great idea, Julie. Any other comments? All right, very good. Was this just for, this was just kind of a, are we voting on this one? I don't have.
Yes, we need a motion and a second
Okay.
to issue the RFP.
All right, I didn't see that. Okay, very good. All right, so do we have a motion and a second to move this item forward to the committee?
This is Mike from Surprise. I move to move this forward.
Thank you for that motion. Do we have a second?
Dave Trimble and Fountain Hills, second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Anyone opposed to moving this forward to the committee? If not, we'll assume it's approved unanimously. Thank you for your input on that one. All right, now we're going to move to item number 6, which is the paratransit reservations and scheduling facilities lease. Jim, is this you again?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, let me introduce the topic, and then I'll hand it off to Mr. Tom Young, our accessible transit manager. So this item is the first in at least 2 RFP requests that you'll be seeing in the coming months that are part of a larger project approved by the board at its September meeting to resolicit components of the paratransit and ride choice programs to help them integrate better. As you may know, paratransit, the ride choice program is an adjunct to paratransit that provides on-demand trips to seniors and those with disabilities in areas not served by paratransit, and on a more real-time basis and at a lower cost to cities. And so one of the things that we've seen in the success of that program is that there was a lack of coordination between paratransit and ride choice, and a duplication of some of the administrative functions of both of those programs. And so Mr. Young initiated a work group made up of your city staff to revisit the business model for both of those, and to look at how we could improve that coordination and improve the efficiency of both programs. And so Tom will start out with a presentation describing the process to develop those RFPs, the involvement of your staff, and then the ultimate recommendations that your staff came to. And then he'll move into the presentation of this particular memo, which is sort of the first step in the process of implementing those recommendations. So with that, Tom, please take it away.
Thank you for that introduction, Jim. Chair Brady, members, thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the procurement of services for our ADA paratransit and ride choice program. Next slide, please. The primary purpose of this update is to communicate back to you the development process and design of our service delivery model and the procurement status as committed back on September 2nd, 2020, when you voted to recommend to the Board of Directors the resolicitation of these services. As I walk through the brainstorming and planning path that is getting us close to the release of the RFP, I will be sharing as much information as possible without disclosing information that could compromise the integrity of the procurement process. Next slide, please. So beginning on September 8th and ending on December 10th of 2020, we hosted 5 brainstorming or focus group sessions with RTAG and ATS partner members that assisted in setting the stage for the development of the scope of work. Most of the information I'm sharing today is directly from those sessions and will demonstrate the level of discussion and consensus reached, getting us to where we are today. Next slide, please. Before I talk about the specific items, I did want to share a list of the jurisdictions and individuals that participated in these meetings and extend a huge thank you to every person. Being new to the Valley at the start of this process and new to this job at Valley Metro, the insights I heard from everybody greatly assisted me in my learning process on the ADA and Ride Choice programs and how they were operated throughout the Valley. Next slide. So before we discuss how we would combine the administrative activities of the ADA, paratransit, and Ride Choice programs, as Jim just mentioned, we needed to know what was working well and where everybody felt we needed to identify a plan for improvement. We needed to identify ways to reduce administrative duplication, but to do that, we needed a better understanding of the administrative functions and cost. As part of the process, I had distributed a copy of a transit cooperative research program study that was conducted in 2018 called ADA Paratransit Service Models, which reviewed how 29 different public agencies across the United States delivered services and how different structures enhance service delivery. The study also dove into performance measures, contract construction, and ownership of facilities, software, computer equipment, vehicles, and other large capital items. The TCRP study was a valuable guide in the development of the service delivery model I'll be showing you shortly. Next slide. So moving forward, I want to quickly review the topic discussions where consensus was reached during our brainstorming sessions. And I kind of want to highlight that word consensus at this point, because as we went through the brainstorming session, we didn't use a majority rules or vote or anything. We got to the point where everybody participating could say, I can live with this. We really talked about a lot of items in reaching the consensus. The first item that was highlighted was the fact that since implementation of the regional services and basically a one-seat ride, customer satisfaction had greatly improved, especially for the longer trips. But likewise, as we talked about that, it was very important for us to figure a way to ensure we were developing a system that would assist us in managing the city and town budgets, especially on a service that seems to get more popular every year and more people using it. There was also consensus reached that we needed to develop a broker model that combined the administration of the ADA Paratransit and Ride Choice, and to keep those functions separate from the actual service delivery, or where the rubber meets the road. And I'll talk a little bit more about that separation shortly. Next slide, please. It was agreed that Valley Metro needed to gain and maintain control of software used to schedule this service. This has been a major barrier in the past, both during contractor transitions and today trying to manage the Ride Choice contractor. As an example, American Logistics operates a proprietary software and Valley Metro staff do not have direct access to that system. That and the distance of their offices in Utah make it very difficult to oversee and manage the contract. We're in the process of transitioning the ADA paratransit scheduling software from TransDev to Valley Metro. And by the time we implement or transition to the new model that I'm talking about, Valley Metro should have full control of both the software system to manage the paratransit program and the software system to manage the ride choice program. A year ago, a decision was made for Valley Metro to purchase replacement vehicles for the TransDev owned fleet. And those replacements are occurring as their fleet meets the useful life. We continue on that process. We do have an order out for the second 26 vehicles right now. And once again, at the time of transition of this contract, we should be close to owning the full fleet, which will assist in the transfer of a new contractor if in fact TransDev is not the successful proposer. We also talked a lot about the availability of accessible vehicles for ride choice customers, and we wanted to make sure we put a focus on increasing accessible vehicles for the providers that serve ride choice customers. As we discussed the broker model, there was a strong consensus throughout the group that we needed to separate the functions between administration or broker services and the service provision. Specifically, the contractor selected could not be a direct service provider. This will reduce the current practice of the contractor taking the most lucrative trips for themselves and sending the more expensive trips to taxi or overflow providers, which has drastically increased the cost to each jurisdiction. The goal of this undertaking was to develop a program where the ADA paratransit and ride choice services would complement each other and not compete against each other. Next slide. We spent a significant amount of time looking at our current contract structure with TransDev to gain a better understanding of categories of fixed and variable cost and the best way to structure contracts in the future. One of the items that was important when we discussed key performance indicators was the ability to have KPIs tracked by jurisdiction as well as system-wide to help drive service delivery consistency, no matter how large or small the jurisdiction may be. One item to note down at the bottom, we did not come to consensus on the use for liquidated damages and incentives. There were a lot of differing opinions that although intentions are good for both the liquidated damages and incentives, that at times it could actually drive a higher price being sent in because contractors will work in any potential liquidated damages to their costs so that they can recover what they're looking for. Next slide, please. So during the brainstorming session, Valley Metro's planning and GIS staff mapped paratransit pickup and drop-off locations by times of day and created a heat map depicting high concentration of service. This information was helpful in discussing where and how facility siting for the operations and maintenance could increase or decrease the cost of service by managing vehicle deadhead or time they run empty, especially at the beginning and the end of the day. We discussed facility ownership and the cost savings that could be realized by Valley Metro entering into leases directly. In addition, using the information from the 2018 TRCP study I mentioned earlier, we talked about some pros and cons on facility ownership, which included the potential to increase competition. Public agencies providing facilities was also reported in the study as assisting in smoother transition when changing contractors. There was a major focus on properly projecting system usage to ensure maximizing the ability of a contractor or actually minimizing the ability of the contractor to come back and request additional monies, just because the projections that we put in the RFP were not reflective of the activities. We discussed the possibility of actually putting out different levels or ranges of service projections that would cover very low. So for instance, the low being during COVID when ridership dropped, where we expect the service to be, and much higher than that. So depending on changes in the area and the level of ridership, that we had all avenues covered for the cost. We agreed that doing the different ranges of service levels was probably the most effective in ensuring or minimizing the contractor's ability to come back and say, we need more money. Other capital items such as phone systems, technology, were also discussed to help Valley Metro gain and retain control of the overall system as we move forward. So what does all this look like? I know this slide is kind of busy, but so I want to try to walk you through this. If you look on the left side, the diagram, the third box down, this actually represents the centralized call center or the broker for both the Ride Choice and the paratransit program. In this scenario or in this model, Valley Metro will contract directly with the broker to administer the Ride Choice and paratransit program. You look down at the bottom of the diagram, you'll see 3 boxes for dedicated paratransit providers. One of them was say that having the 3 boxes was there just kind of for demonstration program in looking at the potential of siting facilities strategically throughout our service area, since it's such a large area, to minimize deadhead. But once again, in this model, Valley Metro will be contracting directly with the dedicated paratransit providers. And when I say dedicated paratransit providers, these are the companies that are operating the Valley Metro owned vehicles. This model includes the broker or the centralized call center. It's responsibility to contract directly with the Ride Choice providers. So they will be establishing the contracts with the Ride Choice providers and having any of the electronic connections by computer that pass trips directly through. And they'll be responsible for ensuring that the trips that need to be on Ride Choice will go to the appropriate provider depending on the customer's priority or pick for the provider. So right now you can see that centralized call center or the broker is kind of the heartbeat of the entire operation in ensuring trip assignments, efficiency, and effectiveness in moving forward with these 2 programs. Next slide, please. So after we finished the brainstorming, and this was actually at one of our regular December ATS partners meeting, we reached out and asked for volunteers from our jurisdictions to work with us to develop the scope of work. We decided during the brainstorming that it was probably best to separate the scope of work for the combined call and control center or the broker and have a separate scope of work for the operations and maintenance provider. So we did receive 7 volunteers on each of the committee. Meeting with procurement, it was kind of limiting to about 4 members per committee. If we got the group too big, it'd take forever to come to consensus and stuff. So looking at the combined call and control center, one of the first things we looked at is knowing this is something new, knowing we're combining the 2 programs together, that this was going to be a lot of development work in putting this scope of work together. So we looked at the 7 volunteers and kind of looked at their current and past roles in jobs. The first thing I'll say is Kevin Link from Glendale and Kathy Colbath from Peoria currently operate systems that actually perform reservations and scheduling functions. So they do have some experience in that arena. Christine McMurdy from the city of Goodyear. I know in a past life, her professional career was actually managing a large call center that had over 90 people answering phones on a regular basis. And then Ed Jones from the city of Mesa, they come from one of the largest jurisdictions of both ride choice and paratransit trips. So we asked him to actually sit on both of the committees as we developed both scope of work. On the operations and maintenance, Nancy Jackson, Nathan Williams, and Kristen Taylor, you know, their dedication to the service to the customer and knowing how the systems have operated in the past, they made the perfect group to help put together that operations and maintenance provider scope of work. Next slide, please. So where are we today? For the combined call and control center, we actually met 6 times from March through May. We have completed the final draft scope of work and submitted it to our procurement office, who has put the entire document together. And we have sent that document to the city of Phoenix for their review to ensure that we have met all the requirements of a federal procurement. We still feel we're on target to have the document released the middle of this month, and we should be prepared to review all of the proposals and come back to the board for recommendation in January. For the call and control center, since it's setting up a whole new operation, we are planning a 6-month transition period to actually set up and be ready to provide the paratransit reservations and scheduling functions effective October 1, and then take over the ride choice December 1 of 2022. I have to get these years right here. Operations and maintenance, we did finish once again the draft scope of work May 20th. We've submitted it to procurement, and procurement is starting to put together the full document. In analyzing the operations and maintenance, this is primarily where they'll hire and train drivers and actually operate the vehicles. So we felt that a 3-month transition period was necessary. So we're delaying the release of this RFP by a couple months so that they're not running concurrent. And we should be ready to bring back to the board probably April for a startup period and be ready to operate October 1st. Next slide. So I kind of hit this here and just these are the actual what we're looking at to stay on schedule. And we feel for both operations we are on schedule. So I can answer any questions at this time.
All right. Any questions on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know that was a.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know that was a lengthy presentation, but as Mr. Brady noted when giving us approval back in September to embark on this integration of paratransit and ride choice, this is a super important service both to those vulnerable individuals that depend on it and to our region, given its cost and visibility. Therefore, before we proceeded with the release of the RFPs and asked you to consider item number 6 on the agenda today, we wanted to make sure you had the context of sort of how we got to the recommendations that we're making and what the path forward looked like.
All right, thank you. Again, my only comment, I think you've heard it from the staff. We see this as a call center. We want to be careful that it doesn't get skewed too much towards the attention of, we'll keep using the reference of paratransit. Ride choice is our preference to try to encourage as much of that service as possible. So it may be mostly just in the subtleties of the presentation, but we want to just be cautious how we present this to the as we set this up, that the idea is really try to continue to encourage that ride choice option. I think that's at least economically beneficial for us, and we'd like to keep that emphasis out there, not let it get lost in the reference to paratransit reservations. And I think I saw it throughout your presentation, and just a continued emphasis that making sure that both options are treated so that we don't fall back into the paratransit as being kind of the only option again, because that is not very viable financially for continuing those services. So
Couldn't agree more, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I think that's one of the.
I think that with that, it's just kind of that observation. I appreciate the depth of the conversation on the committee, but I don't know if there's a thought about maybe adding another city representative who may have some of those same thoughts, and maybe at East Valley City. I don't know. I think there's been some discussion. I didn't know if there was anybody who felt the same way and wanted to make the offering of their volunteering to be part of that too.
Hey, Chris, it's Stephen in Tempe, and we were thinking the same thought over here, and I'd be happy to volunteer our city to serve on that committee.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right, we're going to keep moving this along. All right, so that was item 6.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I think that the next item would be for Tom then to get into the discussion of the leasing of the facility that will be used for ride choice and paratransit reservations and scheduling.
Okay, then Jim, do you want to do a motion for both of them at the same time then?
Actually, sir, this entire discussion was focused on item number 6, so we can I'll have Tom briefly highlight that, see if there's any questions, and then we can move on to item number 7.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Jim. Chair Brady, members, as you just heard in my earlier presentation, there's several benefits offered when public agencies provide the facility and major capital equipment for their contractors to utilize. On a high level, some of those benefits include reduced cost, reduced cost at contract startup and throughout the term of the contract by eliminating private sector administrative overhead markup. It offers improved contract oversight and monitoring of the contractor and the potential for increased competition from small or disadvantaged businesses that otherwise could not participate due to the large capital outlay needed up front when they have to provide everything. So in addition, providing facilities help minimize future barriers during changes due to contract expiration or the necessity to change due to poor performance, and reduces the mobilization time necessary to implement services. The Joint Call and Control Center for Ride Choice and ADA Paratransit program will be the heartbeat of those operations. It's where all reservations will be made by customers, education on the customers on the best service or trip to be taken, whether that be ride choice or paratransit, and the efficient routing and scheduling of the trips on the dedicated paratransit vehicles. This reservation and scheduling function will be the focal point for future budget management in an environment with growing demands. Because of that, Valley Metro believes having the operation in close proximity to the ATS oversight team is of utmost importance to ensure the goals set out by the brainstorming sessions in all local jurisdictions come to fruit and direct control of the service contractor can be best maintained. Based on current Transdev and American Logistics operations and expected call volumes for both programs, we determined approximately 5,000 square feet of space would be needed. While we initially looked at 5 different facilities, over this past year, our regional customer service department has developed a streamlined business model that makes it possible for both the regional call center and the new reservation and scheduling contractor to share the call center's existing 4,900 square foot space lease. This co-location will allow customer service call center and reservation and scheduling to share the workstations, furniture, phone system, networking, and software with the addition of just 1,600 square feet. Fortunately, the 1,600 square foot space is currently available in the Mobility Center. The total cost of the lease for this additional 1,600 square feet is $168,502 through December 2025, when the lease expires. We believe the cost of this addition will be offset many times over by reducing the lease and startup costs of the new contract, and will significantly improve our ability to oversee the work of the contractor. As a result, we ask today that you approve bringing forward to the full board this recommendation to lease 1,600 square foot space necessary for the regional customer service call center and the new reservation scheduling contractor to co-locate at the Mobility Center, maximizing the use of Valley Metro's current facilities. I can answer any questions at this time.
Okay, any questions on this item? So we're making the decision to go ahead and procure the real estate in anticipation of finding a vendor for this combined call center. Is that right?
That's correct,
So
Mr. Chairman. And
we're jumping off the cliff right now. Okay, anybody else have any questions? We're all good with this? All right, so this is item 6 for the lease of this space. Do I have a motion? Or do you want to provide your?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, go ahead. Who is it?
It's Eric from Peoria.
Thanks, Eric. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Julie Goodyear.
Thank you, Julie. So we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone who disapproves of this item? Otherwise, this item will be approved to move forward. Let's move to item 7 now. So do we have a presentation on item 7, Ride Choice Brokerage Services Contract Award?
yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Young will touch on this issue. It's related to continuing our current Ride Choice program until the new RFPs that Mr. Young just described are able to be implemented and in place. Tom, please describe the issue.
Yes, thank you again, Jim. Chairman Brady, members. 2018, Valley Metro entered into a contract with American Logistics to broker the Ride Choice program. The term of this contract was for a 3-year base term with 3-year option to extend services. The base term actually ends November 30th of this year, 2021. Approximately 14 months prior to the end of the base year, we met with American Logistics and informed them of the board action in September 2020 to resolicit the contract, creating a combined administrative function for the Ride Choice and Paratransit program, and discuss the need for a 1-year extension to make that happen. American Logistics responded positively to the extension and communicated their excitement in proposing on the new work. Towards the end of February 2021, American Logistics communicated to Valley Metro leadership the need for some relief of some of the technology requirements in the contract, specifically the mobile and web app for customers to make reservations without making a phone call. Approximately 3 weeks later, we received a written request to increase rates. A couple weeks after that, we received a second request to increase rates even more, overall per trip rate by 41.5%, implying the need was for the increase directly related to the impacts of COVID. After 8 meetings over the next several months, American Logistics admitted the need for the increase was not related to COVID, but in fact, they just underbid the contract. In retrospect, I think part of their strategy was to run the clock out, leaving us with no other option but to give them the requested increase, especially knowing the complexity of the transition and the time it would take to contract with 14 providers and implement new software to manage the program. About a month into the meetings, I began to get concerned over American Logistics' stall tactics and the lack of information they would give us to justify their claim. So I reached out to our procurement office to see what other options we had available to ensure ride choice services to our vulnerable population continued if American Logistics would not justify their request for an increase. Given the fact that I knew a change in brokers for ride choice would require a 4 to 5 month transition period, and our procurement includes about a 6-week on the front end and 6-week on the back end just to receive board approvals, we did not have sufficient time to put an RFP on the street. Our procurement office went back to the competitive procurement we conducted in 2018 and reviewed the proposals that were considered competitive and each proposer that was asked to submit a best and final offer. MJM was one of the finalists with American Logistics. Therefore, procurement reached out to them to seek their interest in performing brokerage services from December 1, 2021 through November 30, 2022, while we completed the competitive process for the Joint Call and Control Center. MJM communicated their interest and communicated they would honor the pricing that they submitted in their 2018 competitive proposal. Today, I'm bringing this action before you so we can enter into a non-competitive contract with MJM because we need to move forward now on the transition to ensure we have a provider December 1, 2021. The cost associated to the one-year contract with MJM is $364,589 more than what American Logistics' current rate is. However, it's $281,791 less than the demand American Logistics had made to continue through November 30, 2022. We're continuing to work collaboratively with the City of Phoenix in providing them the proper documentation to support the continued use of federal funds on this contract. Once we conclude this work with the City of Phoenix, we will reach out through the ATS partners and the financial working group members with the conclusion. I can answer any questions on this item now.
Any questions on this item? If not, we'll look for a motion to approve moving forward with Ride Choice Broker Services for MJM Innovations. Do I have a motion? Anybody there?
Eric, I'll move.
Thank you, Eric. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Julian Goodyear.
Thank you, Julie. We have a motion and a second. Is anyone opposed to this item moving forward? If not, we'll consider it approved. Support. Thank you very much. Tom, thank you very much for all this work. It's a lot of work and a lot more work ahead of you. So thank you for putting this together. Item 8. Future agenda items, request report on current events. Is there anyone that has an item they'd like to bring forward into the future? If not, we'll go to item 9, next meeting. The next meeting for the TMC meeting is Wednesday, September 1st, 2021 at 11 a.m. All right. We're done with the transit meeting. We'll now be moving to Rail Management Committee. For those of you who that pertains to, please hang on. We have just a very few items on that agenda.
Chair, this is Pat. Eric Iverson is sitting in for Stephen Methvin. He had to go to another meeting.
Okay, thank you. As long as he's willing to do motions and seconds, he can participate. So, okay, so we're welcome to the Rail Management Committee meeting of August 4th, 2021. We're going to convene the meeting and welcome everyone. The first is public comment. For today's meeting, public comment is being taken in written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. So the second item is minutes. The minutes from the June 2nd, 2021 RMC meeting are presented for approval. We request a motion and a second to approve those minutes. Do I have a motion?
Move approval. Mario, Phoenix.
Mario makes a motion for approval. Do I have a second?
This is Eric in Tempe. I'll make the second.
There you go, Eric. That's what you're here for. Okay, we have a motion and a second. If there's no opposition, the minutes will stand approved as presented. Thank you. The next item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is before you. And there are 2 items on the consent. Is there anyone who would like further information or to remove these items from consent? If not, ask for a motion for approval for the consent.
I move approval. This is Mario.
Thank you, Mario. We have an approval. Do we have a second, Eric? Or who is it?
Yep, I'll make a second.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. We have a motion and a second. Is there anyone who disapproves moving these forward? If not, we'll assume they are approved by the board. Thank you very much. Item 4 is future items, request for report on current events. Anyone have any future events, agenda items they would like to be requested? If not, we'll move to item 5, as the next meeting will be September 1st, 2021, 11 a.m. Very good. I think that concludes the business of today. Thank you all very much for your participation. Pat, did we do okay? We're done. Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye.